to Breaking Down Bits, a conversation about great comedy bits with the comedians who wrote and performed them.
Hey, welcome to Breaking Down Bits. I'm Brian Gendron.
I'm Drew Jordan. We're glad to be able to pick back up and keep this thing going. We were just talking about it before we started recording. It is harder to do the podcast now that the pandemic is not in full effect. So we're staying really busy. If you're in Houston, we invite you to come out and see a show at the Riot. We're pretty busy there Thursday through Sunday. We'd love to have you come check out a show. That's what's keeping us really busy. But we luckily have a great guest and a great conversation coming up today.
Yeah, listen, comics, if you're doing your podcast, it's about consistency. Follow my words, not my actions. Make sure you're doing it every week. But here we are. Drew and I are doing back-to-backs. We're going to be releasing some new episodes, including today. Speaking of consistency, been pretty damn consistent with that feedback mic, though. If you have not yet participated in our Tuesday night feedback mics, get on board. 9 a.m. Eastern time, runs a little over an hour, usually comics from across the country, across the world, working on jokes and bits and tags and all that stuff together. And it's really helped me grow as a comedian. I'm sure the same for you, Drew. So email us at breakingdownbits@gmail.com or hit us up at social media. Just send us a DM and we'll get you up on the following Tuesday or whatever Tuesday you're looking for.
Yeah, sounds great. I guess this time we got to get into callbacks. A guy we actually had at the Riot and on the podcast. It was always fun to have a comic in town. We talked to Francisco Ramos. Super fun time with him. I think my callback from him on the podcast, it was a little confusing in the conversation part, but I think it is important. Always be sure of when you do something and you put it out. Just be sure that it's something that you can be proud of, something that you can stand by, because you're building a character, as Ron G, I believe, talked about. You're building a legacy of who you are, what your content is, and especially I think for him, since he's more on the TV side as well, you can kind of get typecast if you know. So I think it's just important to really consider your content and what you want to put out there and who you want to be seen as. And just make good decisions on that, because it could affect your future. You know, you create a character that you don't really enjoy, and then all of a sudden you're having to do it every day for the rest of your life.
That's right. That was mine too, but I've got another one loaded up. So don't worry, because I thought that was very sage advice. The other thing that he talked about that stuck with me is be a visual writer, because that really translates on stage. If you can make your bits more visual. And interestingly enough, he talked about the idea that he took out physicality. He said that was sort of, he relied too much on it. And I'm like, man, I'm actually putting it back in. Is that a bad thing? And he cautioned, no, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but it just to help him grow as a comic, he wanted to take out a lot of the physical stuff. So, and then just the other note that we got to see him on stage, and just, you know, he could tell a punchline with just his facial expression. And so to me, it was just a reminder to be in the moment and remember to use all the tools that you have, including your face, to sell those punchlines.
Yeah, I forgot who talked about that on a previous episode, how they were referencing some famous comic, and some punchlines were just a facial expression. Didn't have to even have words, because he had instilled that character and that facial expression so strongly as that character that he could just make that face, and everyone caught it and knew what was going on.
I noticed he was particularly skilled at that. But go ahead and check out that episode with Francisco. Check out all the episodes. Find them at breakingdownbits.com, and of course YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Want to bring in our guest?
Let's do it.
Geoff Plitt has an engineering degree and is an ex-Google employee. After studying at Second City and I.O. in Chicago, Geoff moved to L.A. to be a stand-up comic and joke writer. Geoff co-founded Jetpack, a highly acclaimed alternative stand-up showcase in Los Angeles, and now writes and hosts the weekly YouTube late-night comedy show, What You Need to Know, whose clips have 3+ million TikTok views.
Hey, Geoff, how are you doing, man?
Hi, how's it going, Drew? Brian,
Hey,
how's it going?
good to have you. Always interesting to have people who have found success and are unlocking some opportunities online. So we're excited to kind of chat about your path, which was very interesting. The most overqualified comedian I think we've had on this podcast. Uh,
Well, thanks,
started
guys.
it.
It's a treat to be on this because I've been listening to your podcast for a while. I think it's one of I mean, there's podcasts that have comedians on, but in terms of like the ones that go through the process and are really the inside baseball of comedy, yours is my favorite, and
Oh, thank you.
so this
Oh,
is kind of fun to be on.
that's awesome. Thanks for checking out some episodes, and now you can go back and rewatch yours whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'll listen to it every day.
Take your own advice.
Yeah.
So tell us about that journey. That's a very interesting, as Drew pointed out, very interesting journey from engineer Google into Chicago comedy. Walk us through that a little bit so we can get a little understanding of how that came to be.
Yeah, I've been doing both a tech background and performing since I was a little kid. When I was 4 years old, I started doing plays. I did theater and musicals all the way through my childhood. I also started programming computers when I was 10 years old, and I remember forming this goal that I wanted to be the first person to win a Nobel Prize in Science and an Oscar award. So I don't think either of those is ever going to happen, but that was just like an early version of my two-prong attack plan, So in college, yeah, I went to Carnegie Mellon for computer science. I started an improv troupe there, and I was really into improv. And so I got my degree, and I've always had these day jobs in tech. And I don't consider myself a like a tech head exactly. That's just a tool that I use to get fun work done. So you'll see later on, I think that I sort of have this left brain approach to comedy sometimes, but I also use my right brain. But so I did improv and sketch in Chicago, Improv Olympic, Second City, Annoyance. Very fun. I highly advise anyone who feels that they're not very spontaneous and that they're not feeling that live connection to an audience to try improv at least a few times. But eventually I realized, okay, this isn't necessarily the finished state of where I want to be in comedy. It's a tool, but I was thinking, okay, if that's the process, what's the product? Maybe the product is stand up. So I started getting into stand up and filmmaking. And my goal still is kind of like to be a Judd Apatow, to be a stand up comic and also a filmmaker. And so I moved back to LA. I grew up here. So LA, Pittsburgh, Chicago, finally back to LA. And I've been doing stand up comedy for the last about 10 years and or a little bit more, and also some filmmaking, bunch of short films and sketches, and trying to get a few features now off the ground, and still doing tons of comedy. I have, besides local shows in LA, I've done some festivals, and I started my own show. And I think you guys have seen yourselves from your Riot and other things that when you put energy into the community, it comes back tenfold. When you create opportunities for people, you start networking and and giving opportunities to your favorite comedians that you know in your area or visiting from out of town. It builds relationships that you won't know the impact or the benefit back to you for a while, but they will come back. And so I've really enjoyed that. I guess I'll stop there. I've said a bunch. See what you want me to talk about next.
That's actually a really exciting and encouraging thing to hear, Geoff, because we put a lot of effort and energy like into this show, for example, with we pay to do this. So eventually this
Right.
stuff comes back. It's good to hear. But it in some ways it has. Like we've been able to book guests and make relationships, and we're starting to see some of the fruits of what you're talking about. So that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just
So,
the diversity. That's so fun that you're like, because I have the same kind of ambitions. I think a lot of comics are creative in a lot of different ways, and when you diversify, I think you start to see some crossover and some of maybe do some of your film and sketch ideas cross over into stand up, and then stand up ideas. You go, wait, actually, this would be a better short video. This would be a better sketch. And so, like when you have those multiple streams, almost like multiple income streams, you've got different places and you realize there's some connectivity there in your different modes of creativity.
Yeah, it's kind of like your Sean Patton episode. He said DIY, right? And that is something that has worked a lot for me. I mean, once in a while you meet a comic who kind of wins the lottery and they get, instant industry success in the traditional way. But I think much more common, even amongst my most talented friends and my own story, is that you create your own opportunities. So when I started getting into filmmaking, I was mostly working behind the camera and just filming my friends' sketch groups and this and that, but learned a lot about lenses and cameras and lights and all that stuff. And then when the pandemic hit, and I didn't have stand-up comedy anymore. I was like, well, what am I going to do with that instinct? So I had been, besides stand-up comedy, I've also been interested in late night joke writing, monologue jokes. And those are very different because they are disposable. That most of those jokes aren't going to work a month later because the news isn't fresh anymore.
Mm.
But I love the fact that every week there's 20 or 30 new headlines, so you got rich setups to work with. And so I've been trying to write those, but didn't really have an outlet for those. And so I suddenly realized, oh my God, I've got a room full of cameras and lights. I've got all these jokes. Why don't I just film myself doing these jokes and put them on TikTok? And so now, as of today, I'm at 99,000 point something followers. So maybe by the time this airs, I'll reach my milestone of 100,000.
We're gonna get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But it's been very much a journey of following my passions, following what gave me joy in terms of performing and editing, all the creative and technical. Sometimes there's legwork you have to do to make your dream come true. So I don't particularly like love running shows, even though I've learned to be good at them, but it gives me stage time. It lets me give other people stage time. And I started to really like it the more I've done it, and I don't particularly love being behind a camera, learning how a camera works necessarily, but it has opened up this new avenue for me. So, yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah, super fun. I and there's I during the pandemic, I guess is when my camera craze just really took over because I'm sitting at home like want to share some creativity. So like during those down months, I watched every camera video I could to learn everything about the gear and the settings and everything, and then started YouTube and all that stuff. And now, slowly but surely, hopefully, I can't reveal too much because I want to wait till it actually happens. But some comics are reaching out and want me to shoot sketches and stuff, so I'm really excited about that opportunity. And I think that I don't think we can say it enough. Like if you're a comic, you need to be digitally creating content and sharing that stuff because it's such a cool opportunity. Like I will say, and I have one video on TikTok that has almost 1 million views, and
Great.
just that video alone has increased my YouTube following. And like it starts to cross over because you connect the accounts, and so before you know it, you're starting to see growth everywhere, and people are more eyeballs, more. We're fighting for attention out there. And so if you can use that to put a little extra spotlight on you, hey, you got to do it. There's no option now. I know Dave Chappelle, in that interview with Joe Rogan was kind of talking about Andrew Schultz, how he didn't quite understand what he was doing, sort of kind of. But this is a different era. Dave Chappelle did not have to do this. We have to do this. It's no option.
Yeah, and I think you touched on camera stuff, and you and I could probably nerd out for a while on cameras and lenses. But to anybody who's listening, even an iPhone is totally
Yeah.
fine. TikTok opened up a very different mindset for video. Like I've put content out on YouTube over the years, and I've had a few successes. I've had a lot of failures, but nothing caught on as much as TikTok. I think TikTok changed the game in a few ways. First of all, with all the editing tools inside TikTok, you can do a lot more. But also, I think on YouTube, it's dominated by people that have very high production value and 10-minute videos, a lot of time. They pre-write everything, and that's wonderful. But TikTok's a more casual platform, and it really anybody with an iPhone can just set it up. And it's more about the ideas, and it's more about you know also it's more conversational because you're often responding to you're doing a duet or a stitch or you're using someone else's audio. So it's more collaborative. But beyond all that, it's just where the views are right now. TikTok has more organic reach than any other platform. So, it's the play. As you said, you can grow there first, and then sometimes it transfers elsewhere. So I advise anyone that has any ideas for content or any desire to be on camera to get into it and try TikTok. It really is oh, and for people who don't know, TikTok is not about only 14-year-olds doing dances and songs. While that's how it got started, like anything else, there's huge niches in every possible way. I follow quantum computing, TikTok channels, and I follow lawyer TikTok channels, and I follow a lot of comedy. There's all these niches, and there's plenty of room for almost any niche. You don't have to do any of them. I mean, I built my following with no songs and dances, just recording myself saying these dumb news jokes, and it builds from there.
And you're right about the reach on TikTok. I think that's something that's super attractive right now, is because I posted the same content as a reel and the same content as a TikTok. And I think the reel got around 10,000 views on Instagram. And like I said, the other one hit about 1 million. And so it's until they change the algorithm, because it's going to happen at some point, they're going to take more control, just like everything. So now is a great time to get in and start growing a following and connecting with people who get what you do.
Yeah, I think TikTok, one piece of their algorithm that's interesting is that when you open, if you're just a viewer, you're just going to watch some TikToks. When you open the app, you're not really looking at the people you follow very much. That's only a small portion of it. That's maybe 25%. It's mostly trending content. And so that's kind of cool, because they don't silo people in to only watch what they're following. You're always learning about new stuff constantly. And also, it seems like they audition your content. But by that, I mean, when you upload it, they'll probably give, first of all, people that follow you will see your video, but they also give you, it seems to me, a free 5 or 10 views from total strangers. And if any of those people like or watch it twice, or there's a lot of signals, right? They comment, they follow you, any of those signals, they then reward you by giving you another maybe 50 or 100 views for free. And if those do well, then they escalate you into higher and higher tiers. On other platforms, it's sort of like a rock and a hard place, because if you can't get the early views to give your content a chance at virality, no strangers will ever find it, and you just can't get that started. But with TikTok, I mean, often on TikTok, my stuff will fail, but when it succeeds, I see the early engagement being the reason it got to the next levels. If you can get 2 or 3 comments within your first 10 views, you're off to the races.
Yeah, it's an exciting. It's almost like watching a stock go up. You're just like you're just cheering it along. There's kind of a fun. There's a fun moment when you're like, oh, this one's doing well. I want to see what engagement's there. Like the video that I did, it was so funny because I was wearing a 21 Pilots shirt in the video, and like I would say 80%, if not more, of the comments are just like, nice shirt.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. There's all these little tricks. Like, one thing I noticed is I have fans, but I also have haters, right? But I consider them both the same, because it's all helping my algorithm. So sometimes I will pin a hater's comment, and what happens is my fans swoop in to defend, and then it starts a bunch of buzz. And so those little, like that shirt, maybe what you should do is get a bunch of weird shirts and wear a different weird shirt in every video. Double down on what works.
Yeah, it's true. Just anything, it's just visual, catches someone's eye. There's a lot of 14-year-old girls who love 21 Pilots. I guess I'm one of them. And yeah, I don't know. It was a weird thing that just really blew up. And I think that's why that got so many views, is because there's a lot of 21 Pilots fans out there, I guess. I don't know.
But then
maybe the joke was trash.
Yeah, but now that you have those fans, don't rest on your laurels. Think about what more can I give them? What more can I? Because it's only going to be easier from here. All those fans that you just got will help your next videos to succeed.
Right.
So let's talk about then, if it's okay, taking that digital to analog. How does this translate into the real world? I saw our friend Jeff Joe just got back from Pittsburgh, out doing a show with Russell Peters, and his whole connection started through a TikTok video that got to Russell, and now that's real world stuff. So Jeff, have you or Drew, have you recognized any real world activity yet as a result, or are excited about anything, any sort of collaborations or shows or anything?
Yeah, so my full strategy is I make these portrait style videos and I put them on TikTok, but I put the same ones on Instagram stories, on my Facebook stories, and there used to be Twitter fleets, and I've tried YouTube shorts. But anyway, on Instagram stories and Facebook stories, I found that a lot of people in the comedy community have been noticing those, and I sometimes get comments back, and they're like, "Oh, I've been liking your stories," and I'm like, "Well, if you've just been seeing them on Facebook, you should see what's happening on TikTok." But I guess my point is that has definitely led to more stand-up comedy bookings on local shows, and it's also on the creative side. Writing these news-based jokes for my TikTok has added a new segment to my stand-up act. So I kind of do the first third with these news jokes that rotate very often and are changing a lot. And then the second half is sort of my act that I've been developing for the last 5 or 10 years. And it keeps it fresh, but it also, other comics in the room will notice, oh, that guy's always got new jokes. Every week he seems to have one new joke. And that is something that you want. You want to, my theory, my style stand-up is to lead with the writing. And I think that people will notice if you have a lot of new stuff. So anyway, I do include my TikTok success on my resume when I submit to festivals or shows and stuff, and it's opened more doors than I thought it would, for sure.
Yeah, I think as a comic, like for me and Brian, we spend a lot of time at our show. Thursday through Sunday, a lot of times we're at our show, so we're not quite as available to go out and perform at other people's shows. And so I think social media is a way that has helped me for sure. Just like make sure that the local community is seeing that I'm working and seeing what I'm doing, because those comics are out working. They're not always at my show. They don't always see how I'm progressing and what I'm doing. And so social media is a way that I can go, hey, I'm working over here. I'm getting better. I'm trying to create these moments. Don't forget about me. Think about, maybe book me, hey, every now and again. I think it's just a way to stay active in the community, to let people, see that you're working, because I think as we book people, Brian, we talk about it all the time. And we love to book people that we see out at the mics that are grinding and working and getting better. We feel like as we have an opportunity to reward that work. So, you want to be that person that's working.
Yeah, you want to find ways to showcase yourself as much as possible. And this is another thing I wanted to mention is I think sometimes you have to ask yourself, how can I make this easier? How can I rely on fewer people? As far as these videos that I've been creating, if I was a person who didn't know anything about cameras, I'd have to hire a camera guy. If I didn't know anything about editing, I'd have to hire an editing person. If I, didn't feel comfortable filming them myself, I'd have to hire all these people. So that's how I started. When I first started filmmaking, I was hiring all those people. So, but then I learned all that stuff. I encourage people to learn every tool in the toolbox, every piece of the content creation, toolbox, because I ask myself, how can I make this simpler? Sometimes it's a quantity game, like with TikTok and with stand-up. I feel like just write more jokes, just write more content, release more things. The failures will disappear and be ignored, and no one will notice them. The successes, you'll have more shots on the basket, more shots on the goal, and the successes will then take off, and it'll look like all you had was successes. So when I set up my goal for this show, I said, not only do I want to release a video every day, I want to try for 2 or 3 every day. So I write 30 new news jokes per week. I record about 20, and I edit, and then I end up releasing about these days about 15. So roughly 2 videos per day. How do I, how can I do that without, completely obliterating my schedule and losing sleep? Well, the way I do it is I sort of I shoot them all in one day, and I edit them all in one day. And I also, kind of like you guys, I think you guys sometimes do that with your podcast. And so how can I do more quantity of these? So yeah.
So you get some, you have metrics, and you hold yourself accountable to those metrics. I think comics, including myself, sometimes we have difficulty holding ourselves accountable, which, by the way, that is a good place to have, like an accountability group, a writing group that helps hold you accountable to writing those jokes, because you obviously have a high level of self-discipline, Geoff. Let me ask you about learning though. What are your learning resources when you talk about going and learning about these, or is it all trial and error?
Well, for me, it's mostly been trial and error. Let me put it this way: you could go get a film degree. You could go to film school. You could, do those things. But it wouldn't it be better to just buy a camera and play with it? You'll probably spend less money, and you'll learn on your own. Not that it's easy. You probably do need help. I've definitely watched videos, watched tutorials, reached out to mentors, and asked questions all the time. And I found it difficult at first to learn about cameras and editing and all this stuff. I remember I once took a training course at the YouTube. YouTube has these sound stages and sort of like compounds where you can go and they'll like train you. I think this was back when I was, for example, I was like directing some videos with like Melissa Villaseñor, who's now on SNL, and a couple other groups that had huge followings on YouTube. So I was allowed to, I didn't, but I was directing stuff with them. So I was allowed to go to the YouTube space. I think that's what it's called, YouTube space. So I took a course on Adobe Premiere. But there's great courses online like Udemy and some of these other places to, but mostly self-taught in terms of, I would say the most important things I learned was just by playing with the camera and giving yourself an excuse to learn things like a project. Like, let's say, you don't have an amazing sketch idea. Well, who cares? Just shoot whatever you have and create a project for yourself as an excuse to learn the tools. You were talking about, the value of working with other people. And I was going to mention that, when I got into stand-up, some of the most important things that I did was form friendships. You make a lot of relationships, right? There's acquaintances, which I love. I love the fact that there's a couple thousand people in Los Angeles that I know their name, I know their face, I see them on a show, and that could turn into a friendship one day. But I also have like some really close friends that in many ways taught me things. Like I often become really close friends with someone who's just a little better at something than I am, and I love learning that stuff. And I think the value of a buddy system is really important. So if for anyone who's just getting into stand-up, find someone who also wants to get better, and buddy up with them, because if two of you go to a show that you want to get on and you just go to hang out, you'll feel more comfortable hanging out at a show with a buddy. And also you'll have that person to bounce your jokes off of. I don't just write in a vacuum. I have a couple friends that I bounce most of my jokes off of. Sometimes they give me a joke. And so that buddy system is a key part of the process.
Let me also flip that on its head real quick, because I do some mentoring formally outside of stand-up, but also sort of informally in stand-up. And this podcast sort of lends itself to that. And if you've been in stand-up for longer, and not that I've been in that long, but just if you have, oftentimes being a mentor or a teacher, you learn more in that experience, I've found. And so be willing to do what you just said, take on somebody who's looking for somebody to look up to and follow, and you'll learn yourself. And so be open to that idea as well.
Absolutely. Often they say, and I felt this myself because I used to teach improv and I've taught a few things, that the teacher learns more than the students. And also whenever I'm learning something, I end up writing down notes as if I'm going to teach a class on it one day, even though I probably never will. But that mindset of how would I teach this helps me to learn it.
Yeah, that's my attitude has always been, if you really want to learn something, teach it. And so
yeah,
that's been helpful for me.
That's great.
Maybe we should, I know, I could talk about TikTok and social media and cameras all day, but one thing we can't miss, if we don't mind, let's back up and just talk about your writing process for a little bit. What, I guess I should ask it the way that we always do, but how does Geoff Plitt write comedy?
Yeah, so I will touch on how I write comedy for that show, but also about my stand-up process. So for my show, I gather about 30 headlines a week. I use a tool called Feedly that makes it really easy to subscribe to a lot of feeds of news, and also hide the bodies, hide the articles, because what I need is the headlines. Those are the setups for my jokes. Mm-hmm. I then dump all those into a spreadsheet and I rewrite the headlines, because they often aren't, they don't sound like me, or some newspapers will use past tense, some will use present tense, whatever. So you kind of want some uniformity there. And then I put them in a spreadsheet. I share that with a few friends of mine so I can show them the punchlines I came up with, and they can also sometimes, contribute to that. And I also found really, really useful. There's this great comic, Laurie Kilmartin. You probably heard of her. She's a Conan writer, and she's performed on some of my shows. She has online, you can Google it, this list of transitions, also known as joke connectors. So I have it right here. I often write with this. Early on, I used these a lot, and then eventually I didn't need them once I got natural at joke writing. But when you're writing like a joke for late night, things like just to be safe, or meanwhile, or the weird part is, you put these in between the headline and your punchline. And so I found that when I was blocked or stumped on something, that if I just stared at this list of transitions, that I was frequently able to unstick myself. So it's something I return to when I'm stuck. With stand-up, I have a very specific process. So I use a Google Doc, and I always put the newest stuff on the top. So that makes it very easy for me, old stuff that either is like working and it's great, I don't have to change it, or it's just not good and it's archived, that's down on the bottom. So I put the newest stuff on top. And so whenever I have a half an hour free, I want to do some writing, or when I'm heading to a show, I print the top 2 pages on a 2-sided 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And that's usually representing all of my ideas from the last month that I'm still figuring out, whether they're virgin, no one's ever heard of them, or they're I'm still brainstorming them, or I've tried them, but I need to fix them. So anyway, what I end up doing, for some reason for me, I really like pen and paper, but I also like technology. So I print it out on paper, and I use a pen, and I mark it up like a lawyer would mark up a document. I'm like, okay, check, that's great. Check, X, no, I'm crossing that out. I'm moving this up here. So, and then I come home and I look at my changes in pen, and I go update the Google Doc. And this way, I'm so much more creative, and I enjoy the process more when I use a pen and paper. But then I also don't want to just accidentally lose all my jokes if like my house burns down. So I want the Google Doc as well. So that's like a hybrid process. It's also, for me, it's a pipeline. But what I mean by that is I have these stages where I can have a raw idea that doesn't have any specifics, and that's in one section of my document. And then if I add specifics, I move it to that area of the document where it has specifics. Then I start adding the jokes or angles or ideas or whatever. Then I move it to an area where I'm trying it out on mics. And then finally I move it to my like gold, good bits section. And when I have a writing session, my goal is not, okay, I got to pump out great jokes today. Because if you do that, you'll find it's kind of like the blank slate effect. You're like, what do I write? But instead, my goal is to just improve each bit one stage. So, this is a raw idea. I'm just going to add some specifics. I got something here that has specifics. I'm just going to add some angles or some, emotions or attitudes. I got something that's kind of a jumble of good ideas, maybe some jokes. Now I'm going to actually type out all of the exact wording. I'm a person who mostly writes before I get to the stage. So I like to write out the full wording of everything. It might evolve on the stage, but I do like to write it out. So that's kind of my process with that.
A lot to unpack there. So first of all, you talked about the headlines, and we'll call those prompts. And that's usually as far as the advice you'll get from a comic about writing. Like, all right, you're going to sit down. Here are some prompts. Start with what you look like, what you like about yourself, what you don't. In your case, it's the headlines. I mean, not always, but in this scenario you laid out. Then you talked about the transitions, the Kilmartin transitions. You didn't share any, I don't think you shared any. Can you share what that is? Just diving a little deeper into what that is? Because that keeps you, that's not a prompt. That's what keeps you going. And I thought that was really exciting. Was that what you just shared about the emotions and the angles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see if I can share my screen, and I can also share a link to this with you guys. Let me see if this is easy. I'll do it. Sharing.
This will be our first ever screen share. This is very tech, Geoff.
Do you see this?
I don't, but oh yeah, I got you. Look at that.
So these, you can think of all of these as, this is by the way, this is like 10% Laurie Kilmartin's, and then like 80% my own that I've added. So it's kind of like my version of hers, but hers is public, and hers is very well shared online. So you can find hers easily. I'll probably share mine at some point, but just think of each of these going in between a headline on the left and your punchline on the right. Jimmy Fallon uses this one a lot. It's bad when ...
I love that, because it just it does
plug and play,
unstick you, and it gets you thinking, and it's like sometimes when you have an idea and you're like, I know there's something funny in there. Maybe one of these just gives you the direction to take it, to be like, now I know where to go, and it just gives you it's like a launch pad for ideas that you may not have stumbled on, and they're inside of you, but you just couldn't unlock them.
Yeah, and maybe it's my deconstructionalist left brain approach to things, but
It
I
is.
do I do like formulas, but I
Yeah.
don't rely on them. I return to them when I'm stuck, but after a while you become, especially as you know, when you perform a lot, when the confidence grows, you unlock this creativity of the right brain that will just lead you to all sorts of unplanned, completely creative places. But when you're to beginning comics that are wondering where to start, or to someone who's stuck or stumped, I often return to these tools.
That's
Yeah, it's almost like the Rick Roberts, sorry, not the Rick Roberts, the Scott
Scott Dicker.
Dickers funny
Oh, I love that
filters.
guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's got the
I
I think it's 11 funny filters and they're just wonderful ways to like find a different angle for a premise that you have and find a different way to make it funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I listened to that episode. That was great.
And you mold
Yeah.
them into your own language. You can take Kilmartin's or take yours, for example, and then, change those to the way you would say it. But you find these transitions, and like you said, they get you unstuck. And this jives with me because I never got into computer programming, but this is programming language, dude. And like I could have, because that's how my brain works. I've definitely got that same kind of brainwave, but this is a way for anybody who's getting started, and really who's like you said, creating as many jokes as you are. This is a great tool. So look that up if you can't. Laurie Kilmartin, look it up online and start playing around with those tools. I know I will after this podcast.
Also,
Thanks.
really love the levels. The levels are so interesting and so good, I think, because sometimes Brian and I were talking about there's an app on, I know it's at least on Apple, that Brian shared with me called the Comedy Companion. And it's a nice way to keep all of your jokes kind of organized in your face. And you can set it as a joke in progress, a finished joke, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that because I was realizing that I was losing good jokes because they fall off the set list once or twice, and then you forget they even existed. And so to have those different columns or different spreadsheets to go, okay, this is raw ideas, this is a little more specific, this is getting there, this has been tried on stage, this was successful on stage. If you can keep up with all that, I think you have a better shot of keeping good jokes. And also when you can also, I guess you can look at whatever mood you're in, right? Like if you're in a creative, let's really work some comedy gold here, you go back to the raw ideas and you're feeling super creative. And maybe we're not feeling super creative, but you want to edit, and you can which sheets or which columns to kind of look at to kind of meet your mood. There's actually an article I read recently about it was kind of like time management, but it was for your mood and whatever state you were in. And so like if you can manage how you feel and what task you are most apt to successfully complete in this moment, and you organize your tasks like that, it can be really helpful.
That sounds awesome, Drew. I totally like that. Anything that helps you to organize and bridge between the daunting task of writing a huge pile of material and the important goal of having a great set, to me is going to be helpful. I wanted to share one last thing. This is like a writing technique that I don't use it that often, but I think it's such a great writing technique for beginning comics that I think it's worth sharing. So if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm stealing this from Greg Dean. He's a stand-up comedy coach. I just don't remember where I got it, but just to give credit where credit is due. But I call it the 4 attitudes. And the 4 attitudes are stupid, scary, hard, and weird. And maybe there's a 5th one, annoying. But I find it really easy. If you start with, let's say, a general idea like Uber, and then you get more specific, like the Uber app, booking the Uber, getting in the Uber, the conversation with the guy, getting out, giving stars. So you brainstorm those specifics around the idea of Uber. But then finally, you apply these attitudes: stupid, scary, hard, and weird. What's stupid about, giving star ratings on an Uber app is ... Well, what's really hard about getting in the car and having a conversation with the guy is ... I think the reason those 4 attitudes are useful is that they're the 4 negative attitudes, the 4 core negative attitudes, really. And not that comedy has to be negative. You can totally have a whole set about, I love this, I love that. And I do, I have those bits, but it's not a bad way to start if you're stumped, to just rant and get angry about things. And you'll find that you can really generate a lot of material that way.
I think that's definitely part of the comedy Bible.
Oh yeah.
To some degree, she does, and I'm blanking on her name right now. I was trying to look
Judy
it up.
Carter.
Judy Carter. She shares at least a portion of that with the attitudes, weird, hard, scary, stupid. And yeah, it's just, once again, I love that. It's a jumping off point. You've got a premise, you've got an idea. How do you make it funny? And so few, I feel like a lot of comics, or at least I should only talk for myself, it can be hard to inject emotion into jokes sometimes, but that's the connective piece. And we can think of something funny and technical, and this is the formula, but if there's no emotion in it, a lot of times it just doesn't get eyeballs. It doesn't catch people's attention. Look at someone like Lewis Black. Like, his whole thing is he's annoyed, and you can't look away because you just love to see him melt down. I guess it's just like, it's something about the emotion that just draws people in.
Yeah. You reminded me, I have a couple favorite books that sort of helped me a lot on my way to writing and just doing stand-up and everything. So the first book I want to plug is Joe Toplin has a book, Comedy Writing for Late Night TV. And that really got me into it was recommended to me by Nick Vatterott, who currently writes on Bill Maher. He's an old friend of mine. And that really opened the door to me to writing these news-based jokes, monologue jokes. Steve Martin's Born Standing Up is my all-time favorite. Just, if you want to fall in love with doing stand-up and you want to know what it's like, whether you're experienced or not, I love his book. It's like an autobiography of everything until he became famous. A lot of people's autobiographies are like, well, I remember when Spielberg said, "You're in the movie." And it's like, okay, but how did you get there? So his autobiography starts from his early instincts as a teenager, even doing like magic in Southern California and taping his show. He's big on taping, so he eventually started doing stand-up and taping his shows and then listening to them, which is hyper important. I always audio record everything I do. I just press the button before I go up, put it in my pocket. Always audio record and then listen later. Videotaping in this day and age is important too, because you want clips to post, but audio recording, very important. And then this is a real deep cut, but this woman named Judy Brown, I met her once. Judy Brown has a book called The Funniest Jokes from the World's Best Comedians. And here's the deal. She transcribed all these old jokes. I mean, it's not a comedy from the last 20 years, but it's like Seinfeld and a bunch of those comedians from, maybe the 90s and 2000s. But because she transcribed them, and by the way, she didn't have permission to do this. I think she's had some lawsuits. But because she's transcribed them, I'm a visual learner. I need to read something to really learn it. Like, I can listen to a stand-up album and laugh, but I won't learn from it until I read it. So when I read her book, that was actually, I remember, that was the boundary between me sort of going to mics and trying poorly to do stand-up and then suddenly doing well and writing better. It was because I remember reading it and seeing these structures just pop out visually for me. And I was underlining things, not copying punchlines or anything, but structures, there's this balance, there's this pace and all that. So that's Judy Brown, The Funniest Jokes from the World's Best Comedians.
That reminds me, Drew, of Liz Mealy. I re-listened to her episode on the drive up here to Dallas, and she talked about transcribing all of her sets. So
that's right. She's methodical. That if you want to take your writing to an insane level of being so specific, she does it. She has a wonderful strategy of recording, transcribing, editing, redoing it, transcribing the new one, editing. It's a real process. One thing I wanted to ask, since you brought up the late night writing, and that's kind of what your TikTok channel is all built around, what would you say fundamentally is different between a monologue joke and just a regular stand-up joke?
Well, so these monologue jokes are very formulaic. It's one sentence headline and one or two sentences punchline. Stand-up is, of course, so freeform. You can do anything. You can do characters, impressions, all sorts of stuff. But fundamentally, it's about current events. So, these late night jokes, if you're a comedian who doesn't read the newspaper too much, you're not really into the news, this is a good way to get into, it's an excuse to become well-informed. Like, through this process, I have become so well informed. It's almost like a stress problem for me now. Like I don't read every article, but I see every headline from every single day. I follow foreign affairs, domestic, politics, pop culture, weird crime news, whatever's going to work
Oh,
for
yeah.
jokes. So I follow these little things, and it makes you more well informed. But also I think it's. I'll just put it this way: there's 20 new headlines every day. There's 20 new setups you can try. So if you're a person who can write good punchlines, but you have trouble finding setups to work on, this can open a door for you for that. Stand-up comedy, I'm looking for evergreen material. Some of my jokes I've been doing for 10 years, and they just work every time. And that's wonderful. But these news jokes, even the best ones, a couple months later, I can't use them. So they cycle through, and they're a lot fresher. But I find that it's faster, and there's more quantity of them, and it's also, by the way, it's something that most comedians still don't do that much. Even in the world of stand-up comedy, there's not that many that are really focusing on those. And for example, if you're a comedian who's wondering what your big success break is going to be, maybe it's going to be an album or a special, sure, but maybe also it might be getting hired to write on Conan or Bill Maher or John Oliver or something, because there's fewer comedians that can do that can write those jokes. So that's another thing to think about. And I'd love to get hired to one of those things one day. I haven't been yet, but I've submitted packets to some of those shows. And so whether I reach that goal or not, just going through the process of trying to write for those shows is very fun. And it's a muscle that I've enjoyed working.
Well, and there's also, I think that I recently did a roast battle, which is definitely not my cup of tea, but there's something about being up against the wall to write a bunch of material, clock's ticking, nothing motivates you like a deadline. And your jokes, I mean, these monologue jokes, these late night type jokes, man, the clock's ticking. You can't massage them forever. You really have to find something that you like and get it out in a certain amount of time before that current event is no longer a thing. So that's kind of fun. It's kind of, there's a little bit of urgency in writing and posting. So I feel like, I don't know, do you feel like that obviously you don't have as much time to craft them, so you lean to the ones that really jump out to you, and you feel like, this reached out to me, I feel it, we're going with this one. I'm not going to belabor this one that I'd like to write a joke about, but nothing's coming, we're just moving on, we got to go.
You know what's funny? The way I write these jokes, I write them all in one day, so about 30 of them. It takes 2 or 3 hours. And I approach them the same way I remember taking tests when I was a kid in school, which is, don't spend 10 minutes on one. Basically, I give myself maximum 2 minutes on each one. And if it's not jumping to me, if it doesn't feel good and easy, I move on. It's okay if you have a bunch of blanks in the spreadsheet. So then I get all the easy ones done. Then I do a second pass. And I think, now I'm going to spend a little more time. And just by the virtue of the fact that some time has passed, sometimes I will have a new idea. So I do that pass. I've still got holes in the spreadsheet. So then I do a final pass looking at my joke transitions, and I get more of those done. And so finally, by the end, I've probably 90% of them I've written a headline, a punchline for. They're not all good. I do a session kind of like this. I do a Zoom session with a couple of buddies of mine, and I read them out loud. And I do that before I do them on TikTok. And that just gives me one more vetting phase where I can weed out the bad ones before I do them on TikTok. And that's why I write, it's a quantity game. That's why I write 30 of them. I weed out some bad ones, and then I record 20 of them. And then through the editing process, or if I show an early cut to a friend or something, I weed out some of those, and I finally upload those. And in fact, once I upload my 20 or so per week on TikTok, only 2 or 3 of them will go viral if I'm lucky. But those are then the ones I try on stage later. So it's giving yourself these opportunities to vet your jokes and try them out is important in a lot of different ways, off of friends, off of mics, at shows, online. There's so many ways to test your material and then amass the winners.
Which feels like a great time to plug the Breaking Down Bits feedback mic every Tuesday at 9 Eastern. A great place to vet your jokes, run them past comics, get tags. If you don't have that community, we'd love to help with that.
So
that sounds fun.
It is. You should join us. Drew and I have been talking about getting a current events show on our local produced show. And I couldn't be more excited than ever, having had this conversation, to get out and write jokes for it. But before I want to play some of your stand-up, kind of to kind of get things wrapped up for the episode. But before we do that, we've been pulling our hair out trying to think of a name for this show. I didn't know if you had any. When you were talking, I'm like, maybe we call it the monologue, or maybe we I don't know. Have any name ideas for our produced show?
Well, I've always thought that monologue is an inside baseball term because, monologue to me makes me think of an actor, a speech or something.
Sure.
I think, I don't know, news, the words news or current events or something might, I don't know. I don't have any great ideas.
One of our competitors here in town has Too Soon, and I love it so much. It has to be as good as that, but we haven't figured it out yet.
That's great.
All right, cool. So let's do this, Jet. We have a small clip of your stand-up. I took some liberty and moved it a little forward from what you sent me. So we're going to play a little bit more, and
cool.
to get more of your context. And I landed on a joke. It's that I thought Drew would really like. So I went back even further. But let's go ahead and play the clip, and let's see some of your stuff.
Yes and no. I also like history. This is true. You can share this with your friends and family at the dinner table. In the 1940s, there was a dentist whose full name and everything was Dr. Gay Hitler. Nuts. A dentist calling himself a doctor? I can't get over it. So I'm dating, and even when things go well, I feel like I don't understand women. I was on this date, and this girl said, "I'm having a really good time." I said, "Great. You want to get out of here?" And she goes, yeah, I do. Never saw her again. That's my dating life. I think it all goes wrong on the first date, because the very first thing I say is, do you mind if I record this for quality control? Yeah, sex is very confusing. I was with this girl and I said, should I get a condom? And she goes, no, I'm okay. I have an IED. I said, I think you mean IUD. She goes, no, IED. I said, am I to believe that you have an improvised explosive device in your body? So, long story short, we did have sex, but just to be safe, I wore the suit from the Hurt Locker. I think it's normal for men to worry about penis size from time to time. Totally normal. I do not. With this girl, we were having sex. She goes, Geoff, you've got a mean dick. You never forget when someone tells you you have a mean dick. But it turns out she was right, because I have the national average. Now, look around the room. If you're not laughing, you're the lowest common denominator. I'm bringing you guys median dick energy. It's a mode you may not be familiar with. You still don't get it, cheat off your partner's test. All right, enough math.
All right, good stuff.
Hey, it's good to know that you draw an audience that's smart enough to get those jokes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's people that don't get it. I guess that last joke, the mean dick joke, has served me well. It's the one that I get the most comments from other comics about. Like some of my favorite comics, like Matthew Broussard, who you've had on, who's so funny, and he's complimented me on that one. I think Brent Weinbach, who's also another one of my absolute favorites, has mentioned that one. So it's just a very Geoff joke, because it's math and sex and wordplay. So that's my style.
Yeah, that's really good. I like it. Yeah, the IUD thing was really good. Really fun wordplay
Thanks.
there. And once again, you see, like, do you think that all the time that you spend on monologue jokes and headlines and stuff makes you a little sharper on references, like the Hurt Locker and stuff like that? Because you're just like, you're very deep into headlines and media and news and probably entertainment stuff pops up there too. So you have, like, your brain is probably really packed full of references, always ready to add into the jokes to make them a little more colorful.
I think so. It can't hurt to have a lot of references. I do think these two muscles of the monologue jokes and the stand-up are really different. I have not found a lot of crossover. But I will say, with that mean dick joke, I remember for years having that phrase in my mind of that I'd heard this phrase, maybe I've heard it in porn or a movie or something, but the mean dick, or just that version of the word mean, because that joke hinges on the word mean. Mean can mean angry, but it can also mean just like tough and like fighting strong, right? And then mean also means average. It has those two contexts. And I remember that was the DNA of that joke. I sat there and went, oh, maybe I can put these two things together. Then I wrote that story. It's a totally fake story about a girl who said this to me, and then me concluding, oh, she's right, I have the national average. And then when I tried it, I remember that was the first time I got a, kind of like an applause break or something. So it was, you never know. Sometimes ideas you had 10 years ago, just keep them written down somewhere and keep thinking about them, because you never know when you're going to finally figure out the joke about them.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention that. That's the way that comics write. I used to be on the radio, and the way you prep a show a lot of times is just you're a sponge. You're taking anything you hear that catches you funny, you're noting it, because you might need to find a way to, you got to create, a fresh 5-hour maybe radio show every day. So you've got to just have content, and you become really adept at overhearing other people's conversations and grabbing little phrases that catch your attention.
Yes.
I want to turn on Feedly. I think this is a really smart idea, but like around the pandemic, when there was too much news coming in, I shut it all off. So this would me be opening back up. I kind of, I've had this world now where I get all my pop culture and news from stand-up, and it's watered down, and it's punched up, and it's a nicer way to get it than biased media. So I'm a little apprehensive about doing it, but I can see the value in it. You might have convinced me to get back into news, Geoff.
Cool.
Let's go ahead and do our last segment. I think you're familiar with it. It's called Last Laugh. Okay, I still haven't changed it. All right, so here's how it works, Geoff. You got one joke, and you write a lot of them, so we know you got one to be remembered by. Put on your tombstone. What's it gonna be?
So first, I want to say that no one who listens to this podcast will know this, and this is my first time experiencing this. But Drew and Brian show a graphic that says, here lies funny comedian. So I just think that's funny, by the way. So I have my own, but then I have maybe two other backup jokes that other people wrote that I think are hilarious. So if it was my own, my tombstone would say, I pity the fool who doesn't understand Mr. T references. I guess that's my own. So then the two others that I really like, these jokes just stay in my mind. John Mulaney says, those true or false questions, you should be able to add a third option. Who's to say? I just always love that. And the last one is a Brent Weinbach classic. He says, when I was young, I used Old Spice deodorant because I wanted to smell like a man. Then I developed an allergy and had to stop using deodorant. Then I smelled like a real man. I just think that's so funny.
That's good. Three great options for your last laugh.
Thanks.
Geoff, it's been a pleasure having you on. Where can people find you, and give everybody all the things that they need to find online, TikTok and all that?
So you have to know how to spell my name. It's Geoff with a G, Geoff, and the last name is Plitt. Easy to remember because it rhymes with shit. Plitt. And so I'm Geoffrey Plitt on Twitter, Geoff_Plitt on Instagram. You can search my name on TikTok, but my username there is What You Need to Know. Maybe that's an inspiration for you to what you could name your show. I mean, don't steal my name, but I don't know. That's what I had trouble naming my show. So anyway, What You Need to Know, or my name, Geoff Plitt. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all the insight. I'm sure a lot of comics are going to really get something out, especially the social media component and working that muscle, and maybe create their own interesting way to share their comedy in a way that will get them more eyes, more ears, and more exposure and opportunities.
And more laughs.
Thank you, guys. I love what you're doing. I love this podcast, and it's really a joy to be part of it. So keep doing what you're doing. Comedians and the industry are starting to notice. They're already noticing it, and I keep it up. It's great, and it was real fun to be with you.
Thanks, Geoff, and thanks everybody for listening. We out. Bye.
Later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Down Bits. You can keep in touch or get more when you follow @BreakingDownBits on social media, visit the website breakingdownbits.com, or shoot us an email at breakingdownbits@gmail.com.